Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Higher Purpose. This is your host Suraj Sheikh. Higher Purpose as a show attempts to look at individual journeys and the challenges and the aspirations a lot of individuals and our guests have across their education and professional journeys. We have a special guest today who is a very good friend of mine, a very old friend of mine, but also someone who's happens to be visiting England, and so I managed to grab hold of a slot in his diary and managed to pull him in the studio today. I'd like to welcome Athar Osama. Athar, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So, Athar, you are the managing partner for InnoVentures Global and also the founder of a body called Pakistan Innovation Foundation.
Yes.
So we'll unravel all of those, of course. And today we'll talk about, of course, your own journey, which I'm very, I'm familiar with some of it, but of course, our listeners would welcome that journey as well. But also some of the interesting initiatives you're doing, especially with early age, talented people in science and technology, and also holistic science and teacher training initiatives, and a number of those kind of ecosystems. But it'll be great if you can give us a little glimpse of what's happening in Pakistan generally at the minute. Right? Because I think a lot of people here, the diaspora communities, are connected to Pakistan in some emotional or other ways. And we get to hear a lot about the politics, we get to hear a lot about some of the cultural kind of developments, but at a societal level, there are various perspectives. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. The only word that can fit, Pakistan's current circumstances is interesting.
Right. Okay.
I think
Interesting.
That's the most
interesting choice of
the
a word.
most interesting and neutral word that you can use about Pakistan. Pakistan is going through pretty tough times in multiple ways, and also some pretty exciting times as well.
Of course.
The last few years, as you know, have been very hard politically in the country. There is a dictatorship under the guise of a democracy, that's operative in Pakistan. 2 years ago, we were at a very bad state economically. Pakistan was about to default, and some of us thought that this time, the default is going to happen. Unfortunately, we are out of that now. I think Pakistan is now stable and is moving towards stability. Last 2 years, the inflation was really high, about 35-40%.
Right.
It's now down to the lowest level in the last 8-10 years, about 5% or so. So economically, Pakistan has recovered significantly over the last couple of years. Politically, obviously, it has not recovered. The political crisis is still there, and it's lingering, and it probably will explode at some point. I don't know. The last few months have been very exciting for Pakistan. The India-Pakistan skirmish or war that happened.
And then you found love between
was very uplifting for a lot of Pakistanis, because I think we performed quite well, unexpected.
Right.
We didn't think our Air Force would do so well, but it ended up doing so well. And then suddenly, President Trump found love for Pakistan and not love for India, and has also helped Pakistan a little bit. I think the Iran-Israel war was a little bit scary for us, because we just thought if Israel can hit Iran, then we are the next potential target. So I'm glad that war didn't linger that much. And again, for some unknown reason, President Trump intervened in that war and called it to a close. But it's an exciting time, and this recent sort of the Saudi-Pakistan Defense Pact, I don't know what the details of it are, but it seems like things are heading in the right direction, maybe not politically, but economically and geopolitically for Pakistan at this point. So
okay,
this is fantastic. Are enjoying.
No, I think you've given us a kind of a backdrop for some of the conversations we'll pursue. Now, I did the formal introduction. Tell us a little bit about InnoVentures Global and the Pakistan Innovation Foundation, just to give us a little summary as to what do you guys do, what's your footprint like?
So Pakistan Innovation Foundation is what I started when I moved back from the UK to Pakistan. I wanted to initially create a non-profit to help Pakistanis become more innovative and to use innovation and creativity to solve their problems. I ran the nonprofit for about 4 or 5 years, and then I got a chance to move to the government. I worked in the government for 3 years, first as a member of the Planning Commission, looking after science and technology in universities, and then as part of the Higher Education Commission. When I left the government in 2019, I started my own for-profit company, which is called InnoVentures Global. In InnoVentures, we do 3 things primarily. We work in the area of innovation and entrepreneurship, which is basically led by my wife, my better half, who's also the CEO of the company.
Right.
We run Pakistan's largest acceleration program for women tech entrepreneurs.
Right.
It's funded by Standard Chartered Bank. We have worked over the last 6 years with 170 plus women founders of all types. Pakistan's program is the largest in the world for Standard Chartered. They showcase our program across 15 other countries where Standard Chartered program is run. So we're very proud of that. And I think we've made a lot of very interesting innovations in the program. Our women founders have collectively raised about $25 million. It's the most prestigious women technology program in Pakistan as well.
And to give the rightful plug, Nida Athar.
Yeah, Nida is my wife, and she's the CEO. She's the CEO of the company. She's the one who runs this program,
and she has complete ownership of this program. Fantastic, yeah.
The second area that I'm active in is education and STEM education. We work in STEM education. So I run a STEM program for talented high school students, where we take high schoolers to Pakistan's leading universities and get them to spend some time with university professors doing research in university labs. They get an early exposure to how university works. They start developing relationships with university professors.
And so this is the 15 to 18 age group?
This is about 15 to 18 years age group. We say if you come to our program 2 to 3 years before you go to university, then it will help you the most. The second thing that we do is a teacher training program that we have run for 5 years now. We have trained about 300 teachers in science. It's called holistic science teaching. About 300 teachers across Pakistan, Indonesia, and Algeria, and some other countries as well. Again, here we try to kind of transform the way science teachers teach science in classrooms, particularly in the Muslim world, but more in Pakistan. The third area that we have recently become active in is AI. So we work a lot in AI and education in particular.
Okay.
We run large training programs for teachers, doctors, university professors on how to use AI in the classroom. I'm particularly very interested in the social impact of AI on learning and on societies and on work. So I'm always looking for opportunities to do research of my own, but in the process, if we end up training people, and I think that's great. And we are also kind of building a few tools of our own which use AI for education evaluation and stuff. So those are 3 broad areas in which we work. Essentially, all my personal interests are kind of the 3 domains in the company.
And these are all very important areas for a country of that size and population, with the demographic that we know, which is quite a younger demographic. We're also enabling that use and adoption of AI, but also an approach to holistic, and we'll explore that notion as well, holistic science and STEM and so on. So they're very, very important critical areas for the future workforce, but for now and here, it's of course addressing that demographic. Now, I want to talk to you about all of this, of course, but before I do, why don't we talk about Athar Osama and where did he start? So take us back as to whatever your early memories are, particularly around schooling and education. So I gather that you did your schooling because of family reasons all over Pakistan. I mean, maybe start from that.
So my father was an army officer, and because of that, we used to move to a new city, a new place every year.
So this is a routine.
This is almost routine for army officers, but
yes,
my father was in a particular part of army called the Corps of Engineers. Corps of Engineers at the time was their primary job was to build roads across the country. So we were posted on the Karakoram highway for a little while in Gilgit, and we were posted in the middle of Balochistan and all kinds of places that you could think of. So my earliest memories, and my mother was actually, she became an educationist. She didn't start off being a teacher, but because we were posted in so many different places, in order to do something, she would just take up a job somewhere and as a school teacher. And then she ultimately ended up literally founding 3 schools and a girls' college. She retired at 60 as a principal of a large school in Karachi. But I remember moving from place to place every year, making new friends every year, leaving old friends behind. And that was a very important part. Now that I feel it was a very important part of my DNA. Because I think when you move around and you meet new people and you change locations all the time, it makes you resilient in a certain way.
In a nomadic way.
In a nomadic way. And I have this nomadic DNA in my life, and my wife tells me that you cannot live anywhere. Don't put down the roots. You can't live anywhere for long, and every 3 to 5 years you have to just pick up and go somewhere else. And I guess that's part of me. I can't change that. When I was in the US doing my PhD, I actually, just out of curiosity, I used to shift my apartment to a new place in the city every year, so that I could live in a new part of the town, and I could get to know that part of town a little better. So at that time, obviously I was just a student, so we didn't have much stuff to take around except my books. But now it's become more and more difficult. But anyways, I grew up literally studying in public schools. I never went to a private school in my life. Studying in public schools, but at that time there were good public schools. I studied in a lot of army schools. I did my sort of matriculation from the Pakistan Air Force School in Chaklala. And then it so happened that I ended up at the Pakistan Air Force Academy doing aeronautical engineering.
Which is a very prestigious place for aerospace aeronautical.
It was at that time the only place where you do aeronautical in Pakistan. And we had colleagues from the Air Force, but also from Army, from Bangladeshi Air Force, from Jordanian Air Force. So we had a very interesting group of people. And it was a very, very, very tough place to be.
So before you get into the academy, and we'll talk about it for sure, you mentioned you were at public schools throughout. You come across a lot of private school students now, I'm sure, in Pakistan as well, through your STEMX initiative as well, and so on. I think public schools give you not just that resilience maybe, but a different perspective to society in general. Would you agree? Do you think when you look back at it, that perhaps is an advantage even?
Absolutely. And actually, so we grew up with all kinds of people, right? And we didn't think we were amongst the elite.
Because private schools, particularly
now with the elitist schools in Pakistan, you just see very elite version of the society, and you're not aware of what's happening in the rest of the world, how other people live. We were very different from that perspective, actually.
Much more diverse.
And actually we, so about 3 years ago, we actually moved from Islamabad to Karachi. And one of the reasons for moving was that our kids essentially grew up in Islamabad, studying in a very elite school. And we thought after 8 years that they cannot relate with ordinary people.
Right, interesting.
And we started telling them that we want to move you from this school to another school in Islamabad. And they would, every time we do that, they would make a hue and cry that, oh, we can't leave our friends behind, this and that. And to me, that also is an anathema, because as I said, this moving around to me gives you a certain kind of resilience. You make new friends every time. And if you are friends with the same group of people from grade 1 till grade 10th, and those are the only 20 people you know in your life, then that's not it, right? So we were very concerned that one, they had only this very small group of friends. 2, those friends came from the elitist segments of the Islamabad society.
Islamabad itself is quite elite.
Islamabad is quite elite, and these were the elite of Islamabad. So we suddenly then decided one day that instead of moving their schools from one place in Islamabad to another, let's move the city. So we announced to them that we were moving to Karachi for work reasons, which actually they wasn't. And so we moved them to Karachi, and we put them in a school now which gives them exposure to a broad array of people.
And for those of our listeners who don't know much about Islam, Karachi is the absolute opposite. It's the hustling, bustling heart of the economic trading Pakistan.
And also the most diverse city in the country.
Most
right?
diverse,
Most diverse
exactly.
city in
And the largest city indeed, yes.
So 3 months into our move to, initially our kids were really unhappy. But 3-4 months down the lane, they started getting the hang of it. And now they don't want to move back to Islamabad.
Right, that's interesting.
3 months into the move, my youngest son, who was 8 years old at the time, started abusing in Urdu. Right. And I said, this is great. It means now now they're gelling in. And so, so I think this is very important. Growing up with ordinary people, getting a sense of how the world works and how the rest
because
of the
at the minute, I mean, what we see as a divide between the politics, the right and left wing, everywhere, and wherever you go, I put it down partly to that very, very crude split between private and public schooling. Would you say that?
Well, I don't know if it's a split between there is certainly a split between private and public schooling, for sure.
Yes.
Even amongst private schools, there is a split between the most elite, the Karachi Grammar School, and the rest of us, right? Yeah. Because I've heard Karachi Grammar School's kids saying that, he belongs to Cedar School and he's not in the same league as I am.
Right. So there
is this split even between the elite, right? I don't know. I think that the polarization in our societies now has not much to do with schools. I think it's just another.
It's only one factor. Fair enough.
School may be one factor, but no, it's not the only thing. I mean.
So take us back to Risalpur then.
So I ended up in Risalpur, Pakistan Air Force Academy. It was a very interesting period of my life. It was very tough. There used to be all that ragging that happens in the Air Force academies.
And you were doing aeronautical engineering.
I was doing aeronautical engineering.
Which is a tough discipline.
It's a tough discipline, and Risalpur actually at that time was the only place in Pakistan that actually graded on the curve. Right. Which meant that every semester, if there was one A in a subject, there was also one D in a subject or an F in a subject. And the person who got a D or an F either got a probation or was thrown out of the place. Right. So while we started off as about 40 people in our course, 45 people in our course, we ended up being 32 at the end of the day. 15 people left.
It was very competitive.
It was extremely competitive. Yeah. They took this grading on the curve to their heart. Literally, I think it was probably the most competitive program in the country at the time. So Risalpur was excellent, and I loved it. After the first year of ragging, I started loving it, and it was also a great, great way to sort of build your leadership experience.
And at that point, was aeronautical a fascination? Was it a deliberate choice, or was that just? So
aeronautical was a fascination when I was growing up. My dad was an engineer, so it was already decided before I think I was born that I was going to be an engineer.
Right. Okay, fair enough.
And I used to love, I did a lot of stuff when I was young. I built circuits, I built airplanes, I built all kinds I wrote software. So aeronautical, accidentally, I think because it was the best program, I got into a number of places in the country, but I ultimately decided aeronautical was what I wanted to do. And I specialized in avionics, which is kind of a mix of electronics and aeronautical. It has power, it has radar, it has communications, it has computers. So all fields in one. So it was really a great experience. But actually, by the time I reached Risalpur, I realized that engineering was not my passion. Right? And I realized that I was more into economics than engineering.
That's interesting.
So while I was studying in Risalpur, I would go to school in the morning studying aeronautical, but in the evening during our prep times, I would study, management and economics books. And sometimes my seniors would come to our room and they would see my bookshelf and their management and economics book, and they would say, "What is this? You are here doing engineering." I said, I do engineering in the morning, but this is my real passion." So by the time I graduated from Risalpur and ended up joining PIA, I was full blown into economics, and I was particularly intrigued by how countries develop technology clusters, right? Policy kind of became my real interest at that time. I was interested in the Silicon Valley. I was interested in what was happening next door in Bangalore, and I thought, okay, I want to really learn how countries develop technology clusters. So I was looking for opportunities to study that particular topic, and I applied to a bunch of places. I applied to the Rhodes scholarship. I was shortlisted, but I didn't win it. But I was trying to convince people to get me to come to Oxford to study this particular idea. Then I was fortunate. I got into a PhD program on public policy, and that's when I really started my real quest for answers that I wanted.
And this was in the US?
This was in the US, in Santa Monica,
right,
at a place called Rand Graduate School.
Right.
I was the first Pakistani to go there, first Pakistani to enter into that program. It was an amazing place. Rand is still probably...
So Rand is one of the world's leading policy...
Rand is one world's leading think tank. It is also one of the 8 original public policy programs that were created in 1970s by the Ford Foundation.
Right.
So Carnegie Mellon and University of Michigan and Harvard, and we are at the same level as that. In fact, Rand is the world's largest program of PhD in public policy.
Right.
So Harvard's annual output of PhD in public policy is 3 or 4.
Right.
Rand's annual output is 20.
Right.
So while I was there, we actually overtook Harvard as the largest number of PhD. I was PhD number 204. Right. So, but it's an amazing place. I mean, I obviously learned a lot while there in a small building. It's a small building, not dot small, but still relatively, one building. And in that building, there are at least 600 PhDs,
right,
working on over 1,000 projects at one particular point in time. And the way the program was structured we were supposed to look for work in that marketplace of projects,
right,
and find, sell ourselves essentially to the PIs and find work, and that work will pay for our fellowships.
Right.
So I worked on a number of very interesting projects. A lot of the people there were really leaders in their fields, right? And I remember this, very starkly, because one day in the cafeteria, I was holding my tray, and the guy next to me was this oldish kind of guy, and we started chatting about something, and he said something about cybersecurity.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And like we young people all are, I said something really outlandish about cybersecurity, trying to impress him with my knowledge.
Right.
And as the conversation went a little further, I realized he was the father of cybersecurity. Right.
Okay.
And then I had to literally eat my words, because I had said so many things to him about how well I knew cybersecurity, that it was very, very hard for me to, not be embarrassed with what I had said. So that happened a couple of times to me, and then I totally shut up. I said, I can't say anything anymore. I need to learn first. And that took another 2-3 years before I was end of my PhD, that I became, confident again in what I was going to say. But Rand, I have a lot of, very, very interesting memories there, and really amazing work. I love being paid to read books,
right,
and write stuff. And it was also right next to the Santa Monica beach.
Right. Okay.
So a lot of people in Rand were, I felt, only in Rand because they used to go and play beach volleyball during the during the lunch break.
Fair enough.
So it was really amazing place to be.
So we've had the good fortune. We've heard from a lot of people doing their PhDs, which is a defining moment for a lot of people in their professional journeys. A question I have is, how does one do a PhD in public policy? What does that mean in terms of methodology? I mean, I'm just putting things out here. I mean, do you predict scenarios, and then how do you validate this stuff? What does public policy mean in terms of a research?
So public policy is very interesting. There was a conversation that I once had with my dean, who was a guy called Robert Klitgard. He's a very famous researcher on corruptions,
right,
corruption in societies. And Robert had spent, Bob had spent some time in Pakistan as well.
Right.
He was there in Pakistan in 1970s to establish AERC in Karachi. So there was a time when we were studying all these tools, and I wasn't sure how I was going to use these tools in my life in the future. So I told Bob, I said, what are you teaching us, right? Is this even relevant to Pakistan? I mean, you're teaching us all these, fancy tools. And Bob, something very interesting. He said, look, you're actually doing a PhD in problem solving.
Right.
Because the job of a public policy person is to solve problems.
Okay.
We are not. This is not a disciplinary degree like economics or sociology or something. This is a degree that teaches you a number of different tools. Your job is to solve a problem using whatever tool you can use, right? So in the first year at Rand, we study a number of different tools. We study statistics, we study econometrics, we study operations research, we study research methods, we study mathematics, whatever. And then in the second year, you have a suite of courses that you take that are applied courses. So you take all these tools that you have learned in the first year and you apply them in education policy or health policy or defense policy or intelligence policy or whatever policy, right? So you learn how to apply some of these tools to different policy domains. And at the end of the day, actually, all problems are very similar. The incentive problems in health systems with doctors are very similar to the incentive problems in education systems for teachers. So the basic underlying tools and the basic underlying economic logic is the same. Right? So you learn to apply these tools in various domains, and that's how you become an expert in public policy, right? And then obviously you write your thesis, you have a specialization, etc., etc. But the basic idea is take whatever tool discipline that you have access to and apply it to solve a problem.
So what was the research that you were addressing?
So my original interest was to study economics of technology.
Right.
Right?
Okay.
How governments do technology clusters.
Right.
Unfortunately, while I was there, 9/11 happened.
Right. Okay.
And so a lot of funding for this kind of research just evaporated.
Right.
Now I was actually working on, for my stipend, essentially, I was working on projects funded by the US Air Force and US Army, sort of, non-classified projects in those areas. So, one day while I was still sort of thinking, okay, how do I find funding to do this work? And how do I find a person who's interested in doing this kind of work with me? One of my bosses said, why don't you just, take what you're doing and build a thesis out of this? So my thesis essentially was on performance measurement and incentive systems in research labs.
Okay, interesting.
We were doing stuff for the U.S. Army. The U.S. Army R&D lab was being R&D establishment was being devolved into a separate command, and the Bush administration had come into power at the time, and the Bush administration was pushing a particular kind of a performance architecture onto the U.S. Army, and the U.S. Army asked us the question: should we adopt this, or should we seek an exception? Because obviously R&D cannot be measured in the traditional way. There was a technique called the balanced scorecard, which was developed by a couple of professors at Harvard, and I actually did a thesis looking at how balanced scorecards can be applied to research organizations. So I did case studies on NASA and Boeing and a couple of other companies, and I looked at how they were using it, and then we advised the U.S. Army on how to use it or not to use it, etc. So basically that was my thesis.
But ultimately this is about getting the most out of the whole R&D innovation processes for getting the most value for money.
And how, essentially how to organize it, how to incentivize it. At that time I didn't, I just did it because this was the easiest thing to do.
Right.
I was funded for it. I didn't need to wait too long. My boss said, either you do the thesis that you want to do and struggle for 6 years, or you do this in 2 years and go out and then do what you want.
Fair enough, yeah.
So I said, okay, I'll do this for 2 years and go out and do what you want. And then after actually I graduated, I joined a company, actually a British company called Angle.
Right.
And I initially joined because Angle was doing the kind of stuff I wanted to do. They were advising governments, they were advising large universities. Yeah. Angle is based out of Surrey here. And I joined Angle in the US for a year, and then I decided to move to Surrey. Right. So I lived in Guildford in Woking for 5 years working for Angle. So I did what my boss said, essentially to do the PhD and finish it off and then do whatever you want to do with the rest of your life. Obviously, at that time it was sort of a little bit forced, but I realized later on how useful it was, because when I went to work for the government of Pakistan, this is all I did.
Is exactly what you did.
I was setting up research programs, funding research programs, evaluating performance of research programs. And all of my PhD work came in really handy.
This was part of the Planning Commission?
This was part of the Planning Commission.
Right, okay.
So while at the Planning Commission, I essentially approved and funded these 5 national centers, the 4th Industrial Revolution, centers for Pakistan in AI, robotics, cloud computing, big data, cybersecurity. And one of the things that I used to do in the planning commission was, so we have this project document called PC1, which is the approval document for a project after which the government starts funding it. PC1 has to be approved. In every PC1, there's a section on performance assessment.
Right.
So what I used to do was to take that one page out and I used to rewrite it.
Right.
And then I used to go to the sponsor, to the project sponsor and say, okay, this is what I want.
Right.
Now, please rewrite the PC1 so that you can deliver this to me.
Right.
So that RBM, it's called the RBM matrix, results-based measurement matrix. That became essentially the Bible that I used to live by, because I used to say, this is what I want from you if you want this money.
These were your criteria, right?
Yeah, this is my criteria. Now go and rewrite the PC1 so that you can deliver this. Because if you can't deliver this, then I'm not going to fund it. Yeah. Right? So, all that experience during my PhD really came in handy at the time, because I was really an expert on performance metrics and how do you measure research and this and that. So it was really interesting.
So that consulting career was interesting for a few years, but then ultimately you decided to go back to Pakistan and jump into a number of those pursuits.
I've had this thing all my life that I think I have this thing, I get bored from things very easily.
Okay.
So 4 or 5 years and I want to do something new. So I've done research, I've done consulting, and then I said, okay, I haven't actually, when you do research, it's too long term, you don't see the impact right away. When you start doing consulting, you realize that you work really hard on short term things, and but your client still doesn't do it, right? Because you consult, but the client is of another mind. So I was very concerned. I was very interested in time that, okay, I've done all this research and consulting, but nothing has actually happened on the ground. So I want to do something myself. And I was also very concerned that I would not be a good executive. Right. So I started this foundation, which is actually doing things, right? So this was my third change of career, essentially.
Right. Yes.
I started doing stuff.
So this is the Pakistan Innovation.
This is the Pakistan Innovation Foundation, and I it was a very tough time for me, but I loved it. We started interacting a lot with young people, trying to get them to become more innovative. A lot of the things that I've done later in my life have been inspired by my time during PIF. Right? Because I realized that young people, while they had a lot of energy, they didn't have any domain expertise. They were also not being taught how to be creative and innovative at school. So this whole STEM school that we started was essentially a spin-off from my work in PIF. Right. Similarly, as we started working with innovative ideas, we realized that as a non-profit, we were not really geared towards scaling things. So we spun off a for-profit, which became InnoVentures. Right. And in InnoVentures, we started to gear up towards scaling things, right? When you're working in a non-profit with this kind of apparatus, you are really in the process of identifying innovation across the country, but you are not structured to, people who do scaling of innovation are slightly different from the people who do identification of innovation.
Sometimes very different,
right?
Yes.
Sometimes very different. Yeah. So we started InnoVentures, which focused on scaling of innovations, and we've done accelerators and various kinds of programs through that. So I think this was my third reincarnation as a professional. I had a fourth one, which is the government. Right. And then I again came back to private sector, running my own company. And most recently, particularly with this AI business, I think my final and last incarnation would be that of a technology philosopher.
Well, famous last words. Maybe next year you'll come back.
Because philosophers is what the world needs now. We are now at a point where we'll have to really define what humanity means.
Yes.
Right. For the first time in human history, we have to define what humanity is and what a machine is. Right. So absolutely. I think philosophy would be the next step.
Okay, so let's start with STEMX, because that's a concept that I just want to explore with you, but I'm very interested in as well. So this is looking at, as we said, 15 to 18-year-olds, and you're trying to have these maybe 2-week long interventions, summer schools, winter schools, whatever you want to call them, and really take them through a journey of kind of inspiration across various scientific concepts. Is that fair? Yeah.
So again, STEMX originated from essentially my own personal experience.
Right.
I became an engineer because my father wanted me to be an engineer, right? And then during my engineering, I realized that I didn't want to do this anymore. Now, when I announced this to my father after I was on job in PIE, I had a job for life. My father started freaking out. He said, "Oh, you have a job for life. What else do you want?" right? Why do you want, and by the way, what is this thing called public policy? I don't even know that.
Right, interesting,
right?
yes.
So I was very fortunate that I got the right opportunities. Oftentimes, a lot of kids don't have that opportunity to change course, right? Sometimes kids' circumstances are not that they would be allowed to change a direction. So what I wanted to give back to Pakistani students in particular was the opportunities that I didn't have, where somebody could have advised me at the right time. I feel that before you decide what to become in life, you should at least try it out. In fact, you should try out a few things so that you can figure out what you really want to become in life.
Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to create that opportunity. And actually, when we started doing PIF, we realized that a lot of university students who gravitated towards our program were not really trained to be innovative. And I started saying very openly in Pakistan that I don't like to work with university students in Pakistan. And people said, oh, now you understand the problem. So the problem is in the schools. So what are you going to do with the schools? And I said, I don't know. I mean, if you want to work with universities, there are 10 good universities in Pakistan, you can work with them, right? But there are 300,000 schools in Pakistan. So where do you even start? And we are a group of 4 people, right? So as we were thinking about this more and more, one of my friends, Sabi Anwar, who's the former dean of School of Engineering at LUMS. So Sabi is an Oxford Rhodes Scholar, and Sabi and I became friends when I used to visit Oxford on my way to Los Angeles during the late 90s.
Which is where I met you, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So Sabi and I were once sitting down, and Sabi said, Athar, I've done a very interesting hands-on physics course this year for undergrads, and if you can find me some high school students, I would like to do the same with high school students. I said, Sabi, this is great. I was looking for an opportunity like this, and by the way, if I'm going to find you a few students, I'm not going to find you a few students, I'm going to find you a lot of students, and I'm going to also get other people involved. So we started this school called the STEM School, the National STEM School initially at LUMS in 2017, December. What we did was we used to select students based on merit from throughout the country. They used to apply to the program and we used to select them, and then we used to get them to LUMS. Increasingly, we've also started this program at NUST and IBA at Aga Khan University. So we used to bring them to these universities and we put them with some of the best professors that we found in the country. And they would spend 8 to 10 days working with those professors on university labs, solving real science problems. And those 10 days were really transformative for some of these schools, for some of these kids, because almost half of the class at the end of the 10 days would come to me and tell me that when we came here, we knew what we wanted to become. Now we don't know anymore. You've opened our minds to things and possibilities that we didn't know existed, right? There were kids who came to us and, did a project in astronomy and sort of discovered their passion for astronomy. And there were kids who...
So just wanting to understand this. So I guess some of it was a journey of discovery for them, right? They were discovering new ideas and concepts. But you were also trying to, with the methods that you have, you were also trying to tickle their curiosity.
Absolutely. So STEM school is all about curiosity, asking questions. It's also about telling them that grades don't matter that much. I mean, there's a lot of focus in Pakistan and I guess elsewhere as well on kids trying to score these 9A stars in O-levels or GCSEs.
That's right, yes.
And I told them, look, your grades will matter maybe a little bit, but if you're applying to MIT or Harvard or Stanford, everybody has 9A stars in O-levels, right? So how do you differentiate yourself? You differentiate yourself based on something that you have done that nobody in your cohort has done, right? So we tell students to develop a deep interest in something, right? So for example, I'll give you an example. So one of the 16-year-old girls from a Beacon House school in Gujranwala came to us at LUMS. After she did our STEM school, she wanted to do an internship with Sabi, so she did a joint internship in Sabi. In 8 weeks, this girl, 16-year-old, designed, fabricated, and performed 2 Nobel Prize winning quantum optics experiments.
Right.
16-year-old girl. And she was so amazing that Sabi used to say that, when I come here in office at 8 o'clock in the morning, she's sitting there in my lab. And when I go back at 6 p.m., she's still sitting in the lab. And I don't know what she's doing. She one of the experiments she was performing was kind of sub-zero level temperature. And there wasn't proper, apparatus for that. So she was actually sitting in a sub-zero cold room, wearing multiple courts performing that experiment for hours.
Fascinating.
Right? So this is a 16-year-old girl. So if somebody has done something like that in their high school, there is no way he or she is not going to get a good place in a university.
That's interesting.
Right? Because this is such a fascinating thing to do. We also had another boy whose sister had gone to Harvard for bachelor's. He again came to LUMS, worked with Sabi on an internship, and decided that he didn't want to go to the US. He would rather spend 4 years doing his undergrad with Sabi in Pakistan. So we hear all these stories all the time.
So there are a couple of things I just want to know also is, I think the one thing, it seems like you're kind of, giving them an opportunity to value science as well, right? Because they can see science and, well, of course, in hands-on way, to see what the power of science, as it were. Is that fair?
Absolutely. I mean,
because again, science in itself,
most of our kids have no exposure to this kind of thing until they land in the university.
Yes, but also, I think increasingly, and not just in Pakistan, but in Britain as well, in many parts of the world, science is something, it has a bit of an image problem, right? I mean, people are questioning the value of science, which I find very uncomfortable, being...
Actually, not just science. We were talking yesterday, there is, for the last 10 years, I'm seeing an entire campaign against knowledge in Pakistan. Right. It's not just science.
And not just Pakistan.
People are beginning to not value knowledge. There's a very, very noisy campaign in the social media, if you will, about, why do we need to study? Why do we need to go to universities? Why do we need to go to school when we can make these TikTok videos and we can be YouTubers and we can be influencers? And influencers make way more money than you guys, professors, right?
Yes, of course.
So if my objective function was to make money, and the only reason I was studying was to make money, then I would rather become a YouTuber than a professor,
right. Yes.
Right? And obviously, for those of us, and I often blame my fellow friends who are professors in universities, I said, you guys are not loud enough to talk to the world about the value of acquiring knowledge. Unfortunately, the universities are also failing in that regard, right? Universities are also not delivering value that needs to be delivered to kids.
And they're being challenged in a number of ways. And I can speak for British
universities. So we obviously we try to create the love of knowledge. That's one of the most important purpose of the STEM school.
And while you're doing this, this is the other question I had, is that age group, 15 to 18, I find that very valuable. I mean, in a sense, it is even more important than the university age group, right? Because you really can shape someone's real...
That is the time to influence. University is too late.
Right.
If you have entered into a computer science program in a university without realizing that you are not into computer science, that this is not what motivates you, you've ruined your life already.
Well, it's pretty late.
There are very few people I know, and I know a few people who've gone 4 years of medicine and then discovering that medicine is not what they wanted to do. They wanted to do astronomy, and they quit after 4 years of medicine without finishing, and became astronomers. But that's a luxury that not everyone has. And I've interviewed over the last 10 years, I've interviewed like a couple of thousand students myself. I interview every single student that gets into my program.
Right.
Because I'm trying to discover whether my program can actually help them or not. And sometimes in that conversation, I discovered that even though this guy or girl has 9 A stars in O levels, she's too set in her ways for my program to make any difference to her. Right. So I will say, no, I'm sorry, but you're not fit for my program. And oftentimes I'll find a student who doesn't have those A stars or whatever, but I see the passion for science and I see this struggle to figure out what is it about, and I think my program can help you, right? So
you've got a sweet spot in a sense, because you are vetting them yourself.
Yeah.
You've also got them at the right age, and then you've got, of course, and
then we connect them with all these university professors. We have over 150 people who have come and spoken to them. You have spoken to them a couple of times. A number of our other friends have also spoken to these kids about.
And how many children have you put through the program now?
Well, we've had about, I would say, through the selection process of the program, we've had more than a few thousand applications so far. We've put into the selection process over 1,000 kids, over a few thousand kids, and we've graduated about 500 so far in the last 8 years.
In the last 8 years, right? Okay.
500 students, and most of them have gone to amazing places around the world: Harvard, Stanford, UCL, Imperial. You name the university, and we have a STEM student there, right?
So you have a great alumni network.
Great alumni network now, and we actually stay connected with them. So I have on my WhatsApp every single student who've been through our program. There are course and cohort lists, and when I announce a new opportunity for them, and they reach out to us. Sometimes we ask, we write recommendation letters for them. I also encourage other faculty members to write recommendation letters if they know the student enough. So our idea is to find the best talent in Pakistan and to put them 2 notches above where they were, right? So that they can make the right choice about what program to go to, what to study, what to do in life. It's a whole round sort of holistic sort of mentoring and learning experience.
But this is fascinating, right? I mean, the value of this and you, is there a financial model around this, or do you do support them as well?
We do support them as well. The cost is high, but it's not that much. The universities that work with us provide us use of their facilities for free. All the faculty works for free. My own team, whatever time they put into, goes in for free. But still, there is a significant cost, and we select the kids on a need blind basis.
Right.
And then once we select the students, then we ask them, okay, here's the cost for the program. What can you pay? And based on their financial circumstances, we would create scholarships for them. I actually reach out to my friends, other people. Okay, I have this boy or girl. Here's a boy or girl who has a single parent, or a son or daughter of a school teacher, and they can't afford the program. So, can you give me a scholarship for this guy? So that's how we try to make sure almost 99% of the time. I think we've tried to make sure that anybody who gets selected attends the program, irrespective of whether they can pay or not. Sometimes we've also paid for their travel. And then we invite some of the students who do well one time to become teaching assistants next time.
Right,
so they come in for another experience. Now they are closer to the faculty, and they can further develop their interest. We also invite kids to do internships in summer, 6 to 8 weeks spent at a university with a faculty member. So it's a really thing that kind of gradually builds up your credentials and qualifications for a university.
Yeah, and of course the impact it has on their lives, for going forward is remarkable. You mentioned school teachers and faculty. Tell us about the teacher training element that you're doing.
So the teacher training program started very interestingly as well. It started off as a intervention to try to work on how teachers in Pakistan and elsewhere in the Muslim world sort of mix up science and religion in the classroom. One of my colleagues, we used to do some of these reports at the intersection of science and Islam, and one of the reports that we did was on trying to understand how Islam responds to questions raised by modern science.
Right.
This report was chaired by Professor Esonoglu, who was the former Secretary General of the OIC. The lead author was Osama Hassan, Osama Hassan from the UK, and myself and Nidal Kassoum, another Algerian astrophysicist who has worked a lot in the area of Islam and science. And we produced a report, and initially we thought we would get a lot of flack for that report from the Muslim world. But incidentally, we were invited by the Islamic Academy of Sciences to come and launch the report in Jordan.
Right.
So while we launched the report, we were sitting there the next day and, thinking, we thought we were going to get flack for this, but here's the leading Academy of Science that has invited us to launch the report. So what do we do next? So one option was to go to other academies of sciences and try to present our report to them. And we said, these guys are already 60, 70, 80 plus. There's no point in converting them. We need to go to the younger generation. So that day we decided we were going to work on small school kids. And the way to work for school kids was to go and train teachers, because we can't do work with younger school kids ourselves. So we conceived of this program that would do initially sort of how do you distinguish science from religion, theology, but then it became a little bit bigger. So we started talking about holistic science teaching. Holistic science teaching now is a technique that we have developed, pedagogy that we have developed.
So what does that mean, holistic science?
So holistic means how do you teach science in a way that it is connected with history, philosophy, ethics, religion, and humanities. So
and we're talking about natural kind of scientific phenomena.
Natural science, but
trying to approach
connected with the broader human experience and the broader knowledge base,
okay.
right?
Yeah.
So one way to teach science is for a teacher to walk into the classroom and draw a picture of an atom and say, okay, there are 2 electrons here and there are 8 electrons there, and just remember this, and produce it in your exam, right? This is how science is usually done in our part of the world, at least. Another way is to say, okay, how did we know this? What was the historical instance or epoch when this was discovered? Why was it discovered? What were the motivations? And to really kind of bring in history of science in a very interesting and meaningful way in the classroom, but then also ask bigger questions about it, right? So there's this notion of big questions in the classroom that we have adopted, where the question originates from science, but it goes beyond science, right? It addresses philosophy, it addresses ethics, history, religion, etc. And that kind of gets kids very curious and their curiosity addressed, right? Oftentimes, science teachers in our part of the world are not trained to teach this way. They are trained in a very narrow scientific discipline, and once students ask a question and it's not a scientific question, the teacher doesn't have any frame of reference to answer that question, right? She would try to answer it. Sometimes she would fumble. Oftentimes she would say, this is not a relevant question, shut down and sit up, shut up and sit down. So what we try to do is to give teachers a frame of reference of how to answer these questions. Our basic pedagogy is called what kind of question is this? Okay. Right. And we train the teacher to first discover the type of question that is being asked of her, and then based on the domain of that question to try to address that question appropriately. So if it's an ethical question, the teacher can try to answer that question. Okay, this is what the general consensus is, but ethics is again driven by your culture, your religion sometimes, and so you can answer that question accordingly, right? If it's a philosophical question, then the teacher can tell the student, this is really a philosophical question, and philosophical questions do not have clear answers, right? We improve our understanding of phenomena as we discuss and debate, but don't expect a final answer to this question, right? But if it's a scientific question, it's the job of the science teacher to exactly and precisely answer that question, right? So that way we encourage curiosity in the classroom.
And Athar, just a fundamental point here. So it seems to me that raising those questions would bring out some of the values that the society has around science. I guess if you were doing something similar here in the UK or some of the part of Europe or North America, you perhaps would have different values driving that perspective. Is that fair? I think the question really I'm trying to address here is that, do you think that would fundamentally change how the future generations would see science?
So, absolutely. I think it would draw out values in the sense that if you ask that question in the UK, you would get a very different answer from what you would get in Pakistan. We, for example, take great care in saying that we are trying to address religious and questions at the intersection of science and religion in a framework of theistic science.
And what is
okay? Theistic science means we all believe. We are not telling people that you shouldn't believe in God.
Right.
Because oftentimes science is telling people that you shouldn't believe in God because science can do it itself.
Because certainly in Europe there is,
and in Europe the answer would be different, right?
Yes.
In Europe,
and some of it is very artificial, actually.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So these are the values that the society brings into science, right?
Yes, exactly.
But devoiding science from those values also is not the right thing.
No, of course not.
So you need to understand science in the context in which it is being practiced, in the context in which the society in which it operates. So we bring a very theistic view to science. We say, okay, you believe in God, I believe in God, and that's perfectly fine. But to me, God is a non-scientific phenomena.
Right, yes.
Right?
Yes,
when I'm doing science, and I'll do science with the rules and regulations and needs of science. There are things that I can prove with the help of science, and there are things that I cannot prove with the, my belief in God or my belief in angels or my belief in jinns is non-scientific in nature. And I'm free to believe, right? But when I'm doing science, I'm doing science. I'm not mixing my science with religion.
And there's no tension as such from that perspective.
Well, there are issues there where there is tension. But I think for me, that's a resolving that tension is a lifelong journey.
Yeah, of course. Yes.
I've been on this journey for 20 years, and I still...
And many are, yes.
Don't feel that I have it in my head to figure it all out.
Yeah,
but I'm closer to that. How do I mix? Where do I mix science with religion? Where do I don't mix science with religion? That's a tension in my head always, right?
And just from your experience of addressing the teacher training element and holistic science, is there a resistance to this, or are people hungry for this, or is it a mixed?
Well, we've had some really good response to holistic science teaching, particularly in Pakistan, but also in other countries in the world. And we are now in the process of, we've developed this pedagogy significantly. We are in the process of writing a couple of papers. We plan to, publish a book next year. So we are actually very interested in taking this to other countries.
And do the teaching community themselves, do they welcome this? I mean, do you think they feel this is a
Absolutely. So this pedagogy is not just about religion, right? It's about history, philosophy, ethics, etc.
Of course, yes. Yeah.
And religion is a very small part of it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And I think teachers love, when they start teaching science holistically, they actually love it. A couple of teachers told us that when they started teaching holistically in the classroom, students started asking a lot of questions.
Yeah. Naturally,
there was a parent-teachers meeting where it was pointed out that something is happening in the science classroom, that students are asking a lot of questions on the dinner table, right? There was a girls' school in Malir in Karachi, and a public school with underprivileged girls, where the teacher she was teaching energy, and she started asking a big question about energy, and suddenly issues of energy rights and who gets energy and at what price, and why why some people get load shedding and some people get a lot of energy. Those questions started arising in the science classroom, right? And she said, she literally said, I don't know, I don't know if we can see the impact of what we are doing right now, but I think if we keep on teaching this way, this is going to bring a revolution. A revolution in a good way, right? Yeah. So I feel, we actually, some of us, myself, Sabi, Faisal, some of the other PIs on the project, we feel that this is the only way to teach science. I think this is the kind of the new thing, right? We've had various waves of improvements in science education. We had STEM education, then we had integrated science, then we had multidisciplinary science. This holistic science is kind of the next step, where if you don't teach science this way, that people feel that it is connected to their lives and to other branches of knowledge, then you're not teaching science properly.
And I think in a sense we're doing a disservice to science, right? Therefore, because it's keeping it isolated as some isolated phenomena. But the reality, of course, is that it is very much connected to...
Almost 50% of the teachers that I have interviewed over the last 5 years have told me that their kids are not interested in science.
That's interesting.
And I tell them, okay, if you know that your kids are not interested in science, then why are you wasting their time? What's the purpose of giving a lecture in science if you know 80% of the kids who are sitting there are not listening to you? So you need to do something. It's your fault if your kids are not interested. I can't believe that kids are not interested in science, because kids love science, right? So you are doing something that is making them uninterested in science. And it's your job to first get them interested. And the way to get them interested, to me, is to do hands-on science, one. But even more interestingly, I fell in love with history during my PhD days in the US. And first I studied American history, then I studied the American constitutional history, then I studied European history, Islamic history, Pakistani history. Now my biggest passion is the history of science, right? So I feel that if you teach kids history of science properly, they will be interested in science. And so that's a very important part of what we do with holistic science teaching. The other thing that I'm really passionate about is philosophy of science. Yeah. Philosophy of science. I think all great scientists of the 19th century and earlier were scientists as well as philosophers. And great breakthroughs in science only happen when you are able to philosophize, because the step of discovery comes after the data that you have collected, right? The next step is really a leap of faith that requires a philosophical thing, right? And unfortunately, in our part of the world, in the Muslim world, in the developing world, we don't teach philosophy. In fact, there's a whole campaign against philosophy in the Muslim world over a period of history, right? And unless we teach our kids and our scientists to philosophize about the implications of their science, we will not be able to produce great scientists. We can produce great technicians who can who can sit on a lab bench and do an experiment. But unless those technicians are able to ask the question, what does it mean, and how do we know, which is a philosophical question, they won't be able to make this great discoveries. So for me, if we want to create great scientists in the Muslim world, we have to teach philosophy.
Okay, that's very very interesting. And once again, I think it sounds one of those initiatives which could really change the whole kind of teaching and pedagogic approach. I just want to put a note here. Of course, our listeners can reach out, and I hope that's okay with you, to you through us, if they have an interest to a follow-up, or maybe perhaps supporting some of that pedagogy or the STEM school practice or something here in the UK, because that could be something of an interest, because of course you're open to that as well, and we've spoken about that. I want to draw this conversation to a close, and I think, yes, you mentioned the AI and education and everything else. Maybe we leave some of that for a follow-up, of course, and hopefully you'll come back. But I do just want to link things up, and just in the kind of final few minutes, it's interesting how you've drawn from time to time in this conversation a link back to your early inspirations, your early journeys, right? We talked about public schooling, but we also talked about your early kind of science pursuit, and then public
choices
policy,
in careers, and
would you say that the early influences that you had were actually really important? I mean, it sounds like you're almost being very authentic, to your past self. I mean, is that fair?
Well, I guess, aren't most of us like that?
I don't know. I mean, possibly, but I mean, some people, as you very well said, some people would stick to a certain choice they make, and may never have consciousness that they've done that. But you seem to have questioned.
So I guess I've always been sort of passionate about and trying to find meaning in life.
Yeah, and reflective on this. Yeah,
meaning in life. I think work for the purpose of meaning is very important to me.
That's interesting.
Because I cannot, for the life of me, work in a company for profit. A lot of times, even today, probably 30% of what I do pays my bills, and the 70% of what I do is for the sake of meaning.
And you really want to do that.
Because it is very important for me that what I'm doing somehow makes an impact to the people around me. And the most important people that I feel around me are people in my country, but also outside my country. I mean, I almost became an accidental scholar of science and Islam after 9/11.
Yes.
Right? I wasn't interested in the Muslim world at all in any significant professional way. But after 9/11 happened, initially some people in Los Angeles called me and said, "Oh, we want you to give a talk." I said, "What's the topic of the talk?" And they said, "Oh, can you explain why do they hate us?"
All right, this was the 9/11 context.
This was the 9/11, right?
Yes.
So I went to give a talk on why do they hate us, and I made a total fool of myself. And then I started saying no to those offers, and then people said, "Oh, why don't
you really do hate us?
You give a talk."
Right.
And I said, "Well, I can talk about Islam and science, because science policy is my area of expertise and Islam is my background. So maybe I can talk about Islam and science." And that's how I became interested in Islam and science, and this whole, people still ask me, "Why do you focus on the Muslim world?" And I said, accidentally I became science and Islam, and obviously Muslim world, we have an affinity to Muslim world, so ended up focusing on. But I think the issues that I talk about are also general to other developing countries as well.
Yeah, it seems to me that you've also always been very aware of your surroundings, right? Whether it's the politics or the economics or the region, and that awareness, of course, is I think is very important, because we need to situate ourselves in the current political, economic, national time. Is that so? Do you think you're sensitive to that? I mean, that is partly an influence in your life.
Well, I guess it wasn't always like that. My father was in the army. We were growing up in military cantonments. I don't see myself being too aware at that time. But I think I wanted to do something. So it was clear when I came out of the Air Force Academy that I wanted to do something big.
There's a man looking for a mission.
Man looking for a mission. I was also very influenced, by the way, by Dr. Abdul Salam growing up.
Okay.
So my mother used to, tell us about Abdul Salam's achievements, the only Nobel Prize winner, etc., etc. And I read his book Ideals and Realities when I was quite young. And one of the things that I really noticed in his book was that beyond himself being a great scientist, he was also an institution builder. He set up Trieste, focused on the developing world. He was obviously the founder of SUPARCO and Pakistan Atomic Energy Commission. So I see Abdul Salam more as a person whose influence on policy was way greater than his influence on. I mean, he was an amazing scientist. I always say he was the Einstein of the developing world, but beyond his science, his policy influence was large. So when I was growing up, and there came a choice of whether I want to do a master's and a PhD in engineering, which was my basic field, I thought if I did a master's or a PhD in engineering, okay, I'll be a slightly better engineer or whatever. But what if I did something in policy? I could actually influence the lives of tens of thousands of people. If we could make good policies in Pakistan, I could not just be one engineer, it would be tens of thousands of engineers whose life would become better. And I was very aware growing up that scientists and engineers in Pakistan don't get a very good, career path or progression. Or at that time we were, in the 80s, it was, we weren't as technologically developed as we are now. So I wanted to do policy, and that policy really became my passion and then my profession, primarily because I wanted to see a bigger multiplier impact on the society.
So in a sense, you also had that urge to serve, right? And to make that impact. I think a lot of people do, but they just don't know where to start, or perhaps not take because you were also taking risks as well.
You could say that I got lucky or I got unlucky, but yes,
but I guess we all do, right?
There was this. I think there was this very. I still want to find meaning in everything I do. If I don't have meaning, you can make me an offer for X hundreds of thousands amount of dollars and say, do this, and if I don't find meaning in this, I would say no. Yeah. So money is not something that really drives me. And I think I was having this discussion, yesterday with Adil, Adil Malik at Oxford, that when we do PhDs, we are actually announcing to the world that we are in love with knowledge, and only knowledge. In fact, when I started my PhD, our dean announced on the first day, he said, guys, now that you are here, you have literally, written it down, signed off on the fact that you will not make the most amount of money in your life.
And committing yourself for the next 4 to 5 years of...
not just 4 to 5 years, you're committing yourself to the creation of new knowledge.
Right, yes.
Which is a task that is only given to very small number of people in the world.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's a noble task.
And the other thing that he said was also very interesting, because he said also that all your life that you have worked hard was to try to get here. Now that you are here, there is no other place that you can go. Right? There is no other degree, bigger than a PhD. So now stop worrying about the grades and start enjoying the learning. Right. And that's where my real love for learning started. And I fell in love with books. I was in love with books before, but I really fell in love with books when I started my PhD. And so I think that's, I guess, really who I am. I don't know how to define it in, any other way. It's not that I consciously do these things, but somehow I have to find meaning in the work that I do.
But of course, it's clearly a driver, and it's clearly something that is driving some of your current initiatives, right? And kind of, passing on some of that. And that is important as well. So I have had the pleasure of meeting a lot of young people here, both through my work at universities, but also that teenage bracket that we talked about as well, and of course through the media work as well. What's your advice to them? Because at the minute we have a huge diaspora community here. We've had people and in other countries as well, but what they see is extreme politics. They see a very challenged economic kind of around them. They see a lot of technology, from AI to quantum to cyber and everything else, but once again, it has very mixed associations, from Musk-like figures to universities, being challenged as it is they are, and failing in some way, in various stages. I mean, what's the message here? Is the message to just continue to take risks and pursue that intellectual journey, or do you think people need a little bit of sanity as well at times?
I think my advice to young people these days is try to find something you're passionate about. Right. This is what I tell the students of the STEM school as well. Try to find something that you're passionate about and then go after it.
So they could sustain it, right?
Yes.
Is that fair?
Well, it's not just about sustenance. It's also about...
No, but sustain the interest and carry that mission forward.
Yes, I mean, if you find something that you're passionate about, you will never work a day in your life.
Okay, right? Yes. Yeah,
that's one. The other thing is, if you're working in an area that you're really passionate about, your performance will be way above the rest. So with a little bit of effort, you can do a lot more. I also tell kids to find something in life once and try to achieve excellence in it. Right? So if you apply the 80-20 rule, we get away with 20% of effort and getting 80% of the results all of our lives. But in order to get the rest of the 20% of the results, we have to pull in the rest of the 80% of the energies and faculties and intellect that we have. So once you learn how to harness that latent energy in you, you can be a Superman.
And once you've excelled at something,
you can...
It really changes you, right?
Exactly.
It has a transformative value.
So I don't care what it is. It could be sport, it could be music, it could be anything. But try to excel once in your life. And you don't need to do it again and again, but once you do it once, then you can harness that energy again because you know that you have it, right? The third thing I would say to them is not take things at face value, right? We now live in a
very superficial
post-truth world.
Yeah, right.
Post-truth world. Anything you see on social media today is more likely to be false than it is likely to be true.
Which is scary.
And another 5 years, everything that you see will be false. And for young people, I mean, we are old enough to know how the world was before social media. Young people who were born in this will probably not even have recall that this is not true, right? We still have that thing. And finally, I think develop curiosity and critical thinking. That's the most important thing. You can learn any technology you want at any point in your life. But if you don't have critical thinking, especially in this age of AI, we haven't talked about AI much, but especially in the age of AI, the thing that is going to be most valuable is your ability to think critically. This whole idea of prompt engineering being the next sort of skill that everybody should learn is essentially another name of critical thinking, right? There's a small part of prompt engineering that is tool dependent. This is how AI works. So if you ask a question this way versus that way, then it will give right answers. But at the end of the day, what is prompt engineering? You are asking a question. It's giving you an answer. You are reading that answer, absorbing that answer. Then you're asking a more refined question. And then you're asking a more refined question and a more refined question, right? And that is what I mean by critical thinking. That's what we have always meant by critical thinking, right? Asking the right questions. So I think that is the skill that kids need to develop. We don't know anything about how the world will evolve even in the next 5 years with AI.
Yeah.
So the thing that they can focus on is to develop critical thinking, the ability to learn, relearn, and the ability to, I had a very interesting conversation with a friend the other day, and he said, what is the most important thing that I need to teach my kids? And his thing was, I need to teach them how to read people and how to sell to people. So he said, I'm going to, this is what I'm going to do with him. I'm going to send him in the university XYZ. I'm not really, his elder son came to UCL for a bachelor's in economics. He said, I'm not going to send my younger kid to UCL. I will give him $2,000 every summer to go and live in one part of the world and try to understand the people. And that's a skill he thinks robots are not going to have.
And the power of persuasion.
Power of persuasion. So I told him, I said, give him $2,000 to go and live, but also tell him when he comes back, he should have earned $2,000.
Yeah.
So figure out a way to sell something that those people need and sell it to them and make money. if you can teach your kids that, then they'll not go hungry.
That's a golden rule. Yes,
that's an interesting way to look at what the society will need in the future in the age of AI.
Yeah. No. Well, I think you've certainly persuaded us. As to the initiatives you're doing, have a lot of potential, and we wish you all the best for all of that. And of course, we'll love to have a follow-up at some point. We'll talk about that AI and education as well. Maybe we'll give it a little bit of time. So for our listeners, if they wish to do a follow-up, particularly reach out to Athar. I think the best thing to do is to email us, and we can help you put in touch with him. The best way to reach us, of course, is email us on studio@unityfm.net. I'll repeat that. It's studio@unityfm.net. Athar, thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.